The New Orleans mayor said, quote, "There is no justification for violence of any kind, and we will not tolerate any attack on any of our nation's communities." Joining me here at the desk, Nicole Skanga and Scott McFarland, CBS News correspondents both. Nicole, let's start with you. What else do we know that I did not outline here at the top?
Well, there are some indications of premeditation by the suspect here. Law enforcement sources telling CBS News this individual had rented an Airbnb in a neighborhood of New Orleans. Also, FBI in their statement released moments ago indicating they believe the suspect here had rented that Ford pickup truck, of course, a vehicle capable of traveling at a high rate of speed, Major. Beyond that, maneuvering around bollards, although there is a question of how the city of New Orleans prepared for New Year's Day and, some of the public crowds that were expected. Questions remaining, though, for the FBI that is the lead in this investigation. Were there any accomplices? And one of the questions that law enforcement is looking into is how that vehicle was rented or obtained. Was there any negligence there? Who might have known about this? Was there any leakage in the run-up to this attack, which was clearly meticulously planned on the part of this suspect? Are there any hints of radicalization? We know this individual, a U.S. citizen from Texas. Was there any travel in the days, weeks, and months ahead of this incident, Major?
And Nicole, we would assume search warrants being executed at that Airbnb and possibly at the vehicle in the scene on Bourbon Street.
As well as the suspect's home back in Texas, Major. And in addition to that, a full digital and forensic scrub trying to determine, who this individual interacted with in the days and weeks ahead of this attack, how they might have been inspired or directed. Of course, you mentioned that ISIS flag. No indication at this point. ISIS has not taken credit or responsibility for this attack. Law enforcement officials I'm speaking with say it looks to be more of an inspired lone wolf attack, but at this point, too early in the investigation to say for sure. One of the big questions that law enforcement will be looking into.
Scott McFarland.
Yeah, the FBI doesn't use the term terrorism investigation casually. You have to hit a whole bunch of metrics to qualify for the FBI to actually say that, to iterate that this is a terrorism investigation, and they've done so unequivocally. And yeah, they say they're investigating the potential affiliations of this attacker to see what that ISIS flag might have meant, what a motive might have been, and certainly were there others who were plotting, planning, conspiring, or knowledgeable about this attack. We know the president has returned to Camp David from Delaware today. He spoke briefly as he was boarding the plane and said he talked to the mayor of New Orleans, that the mayor is angry and frustrated, but that he will speak again today about what he's found. He was asked questions about, details about the attack or motives, and he said, "Let me get fully briefed before I answer questions about that." He's expected to speak today, likely from Camp David, to give some kind of update. But I'll also note, New Orleans has been concerned about just this type of attack, a vehicular attack in a big pedestrian area. Specifically, they were concerned about the French Quarter and Bourbon Street. 7 years ago, in a city memo, they detailed possible plans to change the security, to limit car traffic in that area. They said in that 2017 memo, they're worried about somebody with a car triggering a mass casualty incident.
I want to bring in Sam Vinograd, who is one of our CBS News consultants and a contributor, joins us now. She also served as the former Assistant Secretary for Counterterrorism at the Department of Homeland Security. Sam, your thoughts this afternoon?
My thoughts based on the latest FBI statement are that state and local and federal officials have not yet ruled out whether this individual acted alone. They have not indicated that the threat has been completely neutralized. They mentioned that they're continuing to probe this individual's associations and communications with potential terrorist entities. I will note ISIS has a long history of both inspiring and claiming responsibility for vehicular attacks that result in mass casualty incidents. So this particular incident certainly has the trademarks of ISIS-inspired attacks. At this time, with the Federal Bureau of Investigation being the lead, having worked a lot of these investigations myself health major with my colleagues. What's happening is federal, state, and local officials are combing through every bit of available evidence, and while trying to ascertain a specific motivation, their immediate focus is trying to rule out whether there are any other associated threats. As Nicole mentioned, that involves very detailed forensic and digital analysis of this individual's travel history, communications, and assets, and we should expect that part of the investigation to take some time. But until the FBI says that the threat has been neutralized, we can't assume that there aren't other associated threats.
Sam, it is part of our contemporary world that new threats emerge, and law enforcement. I believe the press conference has started in New Orleans. Sam, please stand by. I want to go now to New Orleans and the local and federal officials updating the public just now.
I'm going to provide you some facts and information about what we do know. I know that all of you will have questions, and we will try to provide some answers. But this is an ongoing investigation that's rapidly evolving. So there are some questions I will be unable to answer at this time. The FBI is the lead investigative agency, and we're investigating this as an attack of terrorism along with our partners. Today at approximately 3:15 a.m. Central Standard Time, an individual drove a pickup truck into a crowd on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, killing at least 10 individuals and injuring dozens more. After hitting the crowd, he exited the vehicle and fired upon local law enforcement. Law enforcement returned fire, and the subject was pronounced deceased at the scene. 2 law enforcement officers were injured and transported to local hospitals. The subject has been identified as 42-year-old Samsoud Dim Jabbar, a U.S.-born citizen from Texas. He was driving a Ford pickup truck, which appears to be rented, and we are working to confirm how the subject became in possession of this vehicle. An ISIS flag was located on the trailer hitch of the vehicle, and the FBI is working to determine the subject's potential associations and affiliations with terrorist organizations. Weapons and potential improvised explosive devices, IEDs, were located in the subject's vehicle. Other potential IEDs were also located in the French Quarter. As of now, 2 IEDs have been found and rendered safe. The FBI Special Agent bomb technicians, as well as our local law enforcement partners, have been working to determine if any of these devices are viable, and they will work to render those devices safe. The FBI, we are working with our partners to investigate this as an act of terrorism. We're aggressively running down all of the leads to identify the possible subject's associates. We're working to ensure that there is no further threat. We do not believe that Jabbar was solely responsible. We are aggressively running down every lead, including those of his known associates. That's why we need the public's help. We are asking if anybody has any interactions with Samsoud Dim Jabbar in the last 72 hours that you contact us. The FBI is asking the public's help. We're asking anyone who has information, video, or pictures to provide it to the FBI. We have set up a digital tip line as well as our 1-800 number, 1-800-CALL-FBI. Please provide us with any information that can assist us in this investigation. Once again, thank you for your patience and assistance. For an updated statement or information, please check the FBI's website and our social media accounts. I will now turn over to Mayor Cantrell. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Agent Duncan, for your leadership and the full support of the FBI. First and foremost, I want to express my deepest condolences to the families and loved ones that were impacted by this tragedy on Bourbon Street and in the heart of the city of New Orleans. And I know that the entire New Orleans City Council grieves along right with me, no doubt about that, and our people and our families. My priority will continue to be to ensure that victims that remain on Bourbon Street now will be serviced and removed as soon as possible. But as stated, the FBI is in charge of this investigation and are doing everything necessary to make this happen. I also want to acknowledge hearing from President Biden, all of our federal partners, but most importantly, calling Governor Landry this morning, responded with haste, and we do say thank you. And of course, a demonstration of a unified support is right here in this room. That's how we collectively responded to this tragedy in the city of New Orleans. The mission now is to facilitate, support, and coordinate safety procedures to keep our residents and our visitors safe. I've gone to the hospital along with Chief Kirkpatrick to visit our police officers, and considering their injuries, they're doing well. As I mentioned, this investigation is ongoing, and the FBI remains the lead in the investigation. It is an active crime scene as well. We are committed, no doubt, to uncovering all details surrounding this tragedy. And we're taking every necessary step to put even more safety procedures in place, especially given the nature of the investigation. I'm going to ask people to do not go around our secured area if there is no essential need to do so. It matters, and again, it is an active crime scene. I also want you all to know that the Greater New Orleans Foundation has set up a fund to assist victims, and that information will be provided to you. Thank you, Ganoff. Again, I want to thank this unified team. We're leaning in. We will be relentless, and we will do everything that it takes to render real justice. This team will. I want to also just thank our citizens for your heartfelt prayers. New Orleans is a world-class city, and I can say that I've heard from world leaders all this morning and up until now, in addition to my brother and sister mayors across this country. They're calling, they're responding, and they're standing with the city of New Orleans. And what they always say and want me to reiterate, they understand the resilience of this community. And we're strong in that regard, and I will say second to none. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our governor, and as I mentioned, who has not wavered any in leaning in, providing the necessary support, and standing right here with me, and I say thank you, Governor. And I know the First Lady is standing with us as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Again, I want to thank the mayor. Since about 3:45 this morning, when she called me, we have all been working just around the clock to both secure the city and to solve this act. Again, I want to reiterate that our prayers go out with all of those who have been affected by this tragedy. I want to thank our law enforcement officers. I want to thank our medical personnel. I want to thank our first responders. And most importantly, I want to thank the two New Orleans police officers who not only laid their life on the line, but were able to eliminate the threat this morning. Let me say, we have made public safety a state priority from day one. And I think that if you look around me today, right now, and you look at the people who are standing around, that is their commitment as well. We intend to be transparent in assessing any defects that may have existed in the system so that we can address it. It's the only way to ensure that any mistakes that were made are corrected. Specifically, we have been trying and working very diligently to address security concerns in preparation for the Super Bowl since October. And it's interesting because, ironically, in preparation for the Super Bowl, I had intended to issue an emergency declaration tomorrow so that we could bring all of our federal, state, and local agencies to bear in preparation for the Super Bowl and Mardi Gras. But because of the events today, I have amended that emergency declaration and issued it today. So again, that declaration will allow our federal, state, and local partners to bring all of the resources necessary to get this city safe. In light of that executive order, I have also ordered the mobilization of a military police company. I've asked General Freelou to mobilize a military police company to assist both New Orleans Police and LSP and the FBI. It is important for our citizens and guests of this state to know that we are doing everything we can to secure their safety in this city. We want to make it clear, the Superdome and the surrounding area is safe. But I've always said that the safety of this entire city is something that is always paramount to me. With that, I would like to turn it over to Jeff with the Super Bowl. Jeff Dunley.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Obviously, we wish we weren't here for this reason today. The Sugar Bowl Committee has a 90-year history of being a good corporate citizen for the city of New Orleans, and that's why this tragedy hurts us as much as anybody right now. So our condolences, thoughts, and prayers go out to the victims and their families as we all work through this. Of course, anytime we have a major event in the city of New Orleans, public safety is paramount, and we have full faith and confidence in the governor and the mayor and all the assets, the federal, state, and local resources that they've applied to this event so that we can ultimately bring those responsible to justice and carry on with the major events that we have in front of us. Speaking of which, we were scheduled this evening to have a CFP quarterfinal played in the Superdome at 7:45. We have been in consultation with ESPN, with the College Football Playoff, with the Southeastern Conference, with the University of Georgia, with Notre Dame. All parties and all agree that it's in the best interest of everybody and public safety that we postpone the game for 24 hours. Work is fast about to set up a safe and efficient and fun environment for tomorrow night. There'll be more details on that in the coming hours, but for now, that's the plan, that we're going to move forward and play the game. And again, we reiterate our thanks to everyone up here for the important work they're doing. We live in the fun and games world with what we do, but we certainly recognize the importance of this, and we're going to support it 100%. So thank you.
I'd like to bring up Senator Kennedy.
I wish I understood better why bad things happen to good people. If I make it to heaven, I'm going to ask. For those people who don't believe in objective evil, all you have to do is look at what happened in our city early this morning. I am, if this doesn't trigger the gag reflex of every American, every fair-minded American, I'll be very surprised. I'm here because these are my people. I'm here because these are my people's friends. I'm here because there are a lot of Louisianians that are scared tonight. I don't want them to be. There's a lot of information going around. Some of it is actually true. Some of it isn't. The federal government is now in charge of this investigation. By that, I mean the White House, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Justice. I have not talked to the FBI. Maybe they've talked to my staff. I don't know. I did talk to the Secretary of Homeland Security a little while ago. And I told him that with all the respect I could muster, that we expect to put the full force and resources of the federal government behind this investigation. Our state troopers, our local police departments, our sheriffs, we've got many sheriffs here today, have been terrific so far. The federal government is cooperating with them. I hope that will continue. Here's what I want to ask from the federal government. Catch these people. Catch these people. And then tell the American people the truth. Now, I don't want you to tell us yet anything that's going to interfere with your investigation. And there are things that I've been told that I think are true that I'm not sharing with you today because it could interfere with their investigation. But after we get to the bottom of this, they need to tell the American people the truth, and the people of New Orleans the truth, and the people of America the truth. I think the mayor and the governor are very wise to postpone this ball game for 24 hours. There's just too much stuff we don't know, and it's just not worth it. But I guess my final point is, I will promise you this. I will, when it is appropriate and this investigation is complete, you will find out what happened and who was responsible. Or I will raise fresh hell. And I will chase those in the federal government who are responsible for telling us what happened, like they stole Christmas.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Congressman Carter, I think.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Thank you to all of our law enforcement agents for doing a yeoman's job, for stepping up at a time when we needed you most, for employing the resources of all of our partners. This is all hands on deck, from the White House all the way down. I've been in communication with the White House since early this morning. Secretary Mayorkas, leaders in all of our federal, local, and state agencies. The President has made it very clear that he intends to bring every resource to bear to not only tell the truth, but to provide the resources to bring these cowards to justice. I want to personally thank the men and women in uniform who put their lives on the line to protect our citizens and our visitors. To our mayor and our governor for acting expeditiously and bringing us all together. To our sheriffs from the surrounding areas who have been Johnny on the spot, recognizing that if it happens in New Orleans, it can happen anywhere. We don't have the luxury of being myopic. In this community, we work together. We don't point fingers. We don't blame. We go after the bad guys. Let it be clear that the full faith and credit of the United States and every agency therein is on the ground, working. And for those who may have played a role in this horrific act of cowardice, we will find you. We will bring you to justice. New Orleans is a place that heralds its ability to protect its citizens, that heralds its ability to manage major events. Super Bowls, Sugar Bowls, Mardi Gras, Jazz Fest, Essence Festival. You name it, no one does it better than law enforcement in New Orleans and in the surrounding area. Kudos to those two officers who've been wounded. Our hearts go out to those who lost loved ones. Our hearts go out to those who are wounded and on the mend in the hospital. Citizens, now is the time to stay calm, to be vigilant. This is not a time to come out to sightsee. Listen to your federal, local, state officials. Be vigilant. If you saw something, say something. If you know something, tell someone. There are tip lines, there's information available. Please, all hands on deck. Rest assured that the decision that was made to postpone the game was not done lightly. It was done with one single thing in mind: public safety. Making sure that the citizens and visitors of this great city, not only for this event, but for every event you come to in Louisiana, that you will be safe and we will use every resource possible, as the governor has said, as the mayor has said, and every law enforcement agent here has said. Our energy, our commitment will be to make sure that you are safe now and for every event in the future. God bless you, and let's stay strong.
Thank you, Congressman. Attorney General.
I first want to extend my sincerest condolences to the families of the victims. Parents got a phone call last night, early this morning, that no parent ever wants to receive. And as a parent of children who come to New Orleans and spend time here, I know that that is just something that, you know, we hold our breath sometimes till they're home safe, and some people did not come home safe. And we also have some people who are fighting for their lives right now in the hospital. So I'd ask everyone to pray for them. They need our support and they need our prayers. This was a heinous act, a heinous, cowardly act, and we will find them and we will bring them to justice. My office will be providing both investigative and prosecutorial support to the City of New Orleans, to the District Attorney, Jason Williams in New Orleans, as I have done for months. We will continue to do that. We will provide the governor with whatever support that he needs, and the Governor's Office of Homeland Security, whatever support that they need. I'll be here to help. I will be here to stand with the City of New Orleans. We will bring them to justice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Governor and Madam Mayor. For those who do not know me, my name is Ann Kirkpatrick. I'm the Chief of Police of New Orleans. My official title is Superintendent, but my role is as Chief of Police. You know, you've heard some of the details today, and over the last 24 hours, we had approximately 400 officers in the French Quarter. And as we know, this is not just an act of terrorism. This is evil. And when we face evil, we have a choice. We can run in fear, or we can indeed stand in strength. In a time of crisis, people are looking for leadership. You are looking at the leadership. And I promise you, as the Chief of Police of this city has been tried by fire before. But fire purifies. Fire makes things stronger. We have a plan. We know what to do. We are going to get these people. There is a path forward. Very pleased that we will be back to having a wonderful game tomorrow night. New Orleans police have proven their ability to make the city safer. Just 2 years ago, we were the murder capital of America. Today, from that time 2 years ago, we have driven our murder rate more than 50% down. So we have a track record. But this is different because it's terrorism. Now, I want to thank all of our law enforcement partners. You're fabulous, and we appreciate the partnership. But last night, 3 of our officers engaged this terrorist who shot at them. 3 of the officers returned fire. Those officers did not run in fear. I liked what the mayor said this morning. New Orleans police and all law enforcement is built. We are built for dealing with evil, with things that would cause others to be in fear, but instead our officers, and last night NOPD in particular, stood strong. They did not run. They did kill the terrorist. We have 2 officers indeed who received gunfire. They will be Okay, we have personally gone to see them. But this is leadership for you. And I promise, as the chief of police of this fantastic city, that I will be strong and firm and fearless. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. In wrapping it up, I want to just close with a couple of things. I want to thank Senator Kennedy and Congressman Carter. I want to thank again all of our law enforcement officers out there. I want the families of the victims to know that I will be issuing an executive order that tomorrow, when Notre Dame plays Georgia, every flag of every state building in this state is going to be at half-mast. In remembrance of them, but remembering something else. That fear in this state is a liar. And these folks right here are going to make sure that justice is served. And for the citizens out there that were thinking, well, man, do I really want to go to the Sugar Bowl tomorrow? I tell you one thing, your governor's going to be there. That is proof, believe you me, that that facility in this city is safer today than it was yesterday. And as we come to additional events in this city, I know in speaking with Senator Kennedy and Congressman Carter, and FBI acting director, and the incoming administration, that they are going to ensure that this city has the resources necessary to protect our citizens and our guests. And so with that, we'll take some questions.
All right, if you could, we'll start over here with CBS. Katie, we'll work our way across the room. If I miss you, just give me a holler. I may not see you. Go ahead, Katie.
Thank you, sir. Katie Weiss with CBS News. I mean, I think this has been a really tough day for a lot of people, but at this point, we're hearing that the death toll, according to some FBI sources, has gone up to 15. Is this true?
Who wants to answer?
I can speak for it, because unless you have a final number. We do not have a final number. We know that we have confirmed 10, but we did have people who had been transported who were in critical condition. And so I do not know that, but I can confirm 10.
And one quick follow-up question, if I may. We know that there have been some local records in Texas about a misdemeanor background on this suspect. Any signs or warnings ahead of time about this person or their plans for what happened this morning?
Because that is the investigation part, I will give the FBI.
At this time, we cannot go into details about the subject's history. What I can tell you, the person was an Army veteran. We believe he was honorary discharge, but we're working through this process, figuring out all this information. The goal with the FBI is providing you with the most accurate and complete information. So once that information is confirmed, we'll make sure we push that out. Thank you.
Ariel.
At this time, do you know exactly, as far as the victims, how many are from here in Louisiana versus out of state, and their ages maybe?
At this time, I can't go into details about all the victims. We want to make sure that the family is notified appropriately before we put any information out there. So once the families are all notified, then we'll go ahead and release a statement to everyone.
And I would ask the press, in relation to the victims and those that are in hospitals, if we could just refrain from worrying about them so their loved ones can take care of them, and the medical personnel that are trying to get them out of the hospital can do so. And as information becomes available, we want to respect the privacy of those who are still either fighting for their lives or being cared for. Thank you.
A follow-up, if I may.
Go ahead.
You guys mentioned accomplices. You don't think that the suspect acted alone. About how many more suspects are you guys looking into at this point?
It's a range of suspects. Right now with the FBI, we do not want to rule anything out. So that's why we're asking if anyone has had any interaction with the deceased subject, Jabbar, in the last 72 hours, provide us with this information. You can provide us that information through 1-800-CALL-FBI or our digital tips line, which is available on our social media website, as well as the big FBI website.
Can I say something like that? Tell me who you're with.
WDSU.
WDSU. Okay, and CBS.
The NBC's over here on the right.
Oh, that's an unusual position.
I don't get it.
You wouldn't. Look, the FBI is not going to be able to answer those questions, okay? They will eventually, I promise you, okay? Once the FBI has a chance to investigate all this, along working with state police, working with Homeland Security, working with the city of New Orleans, they're going to tell you what happened. I can promise you that, or I'm going to raise fresh hell. But right now, they're in the process of trying to catch the other bad guys. And I want to give them the benefit of the doubt for a while.
26.
Yeah, I had a question about the victims. I know that there was obviously gunfire exchange, so I guess how many victims were shot and then how many were injured?
Look, again, let me reiterate both Special Agent Duncan and Senator Kennedy. There's a lot of, I get that y'all want to know minute details. What we don't want to do is impede this investigation or spend any time talking about things that don't get us closer to hunting these folks down and securing the city. And so at a particular point in time, we will release as much information as we can. But at this time, in relation to the investigation, I would ask y'all to refrain from those.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if we're going to just have more of the same, as the governor just said, we're going to provide that information, but we're going to wrap the press conference now.
Hold on a second. Hold on.
Let me finish. You weren't listening. If all of the questions are more of the same, what the governor just said in position, we won't be doing that to provide that information. And if you have a quick, different question, then let's do that quickly and move on. Okay?
My question. Hold on. It's in an orderly fashion.
You say there
are multiple suspects. Hold on, sir. Hold on. Then who was next? We had over here.
Hi, Rachel Wolf from the Wall Street Journal. You said you were confident there are multiple suspects involved. What makes you confident in that?
Well, like, why would we tell you that? Again, again, we want to answer pertinent questions. But anything that would lead to impeding or endangering this investigation is not going to be said, okay? And we will, as information unfolds, this is a very fluid process. And remember something, too. We're doing two things. We're hunting some bad people down, and we're securing the city, too. We're getting ready for a Sugar Bowl tomorrow. So if y'all would, again, if you have questions regarding Sugar Bowl, the safety of the city, or something to that effect, we're happy to answer.
There's over here.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Alyssa.
Okay, 1 second. Usually in parts of the French Quarter, specifically in parts of Bourbon Street, there are bollards. We're hearing that some of those may have been down because of repairs. Can you speak to that? And maybe was there any backup option of putting a truck there or an NOPD car there?
Well, let me tell you, yeah, one, I'm going to let the mayor answer. I want you to know that's one of the first things I thought of this morning when the mayor called me, okay? And I will tell you that whatever the problem was is going to be solved.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Governor, and thank you for the question. I do understand that it's been on your radar since this morning. As it relates to the bollards on Bourbon Street, over 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, the city of New Orleans implemented an infrastructure project placing bollards on Bourbon Street. Shortly thereafter, the malfunctions of those bollards ensued from Mardi Gras beads on down. But the New Orleans Police Department, of course, deemed them inefficient because they did not operate the way that they were intended to do. Because the city of New Orleans is hosting Super Bowl this year, it gave the city of New Orleans an opportunity to go further and deeper with infrastructure improvements, as we've been talking about. So as a result of that, we were able to build in bollard replacement into our Super Bowl infrastructure package. And because of that, the city of New Orleans has moved forward with that infrastructure that is nearing completion. Bollards were not up because they are near completion, with the expectation of being completed, of course, by Super Bowl, way before Super Bowl. But that is the reason. Now, the New Orleans Police Department and Chief, you can speak to the deployment to respond to our needs and existing conditions.
All right, so we have been aware of the bollard situation for a long time, and we did indeed harden those target areas where the bollards are. We have patrol cars out there as a hard target, as well as with barriers. Now, I want to share with y'all, if you did not know, that this particular terrorist drove around onto the sidewalk and got around the hard target, where he did have a car there, we had barriers there, we had officers there, and they still got around. Now, the wedges that you see out there as well, we knew that that had malfunction problems. And I want you to understand, let's say we put the wedge up and it got stuck. There is no way that ambulance could get in or out, people couldn't get in and out, so we knew that these were malfunction. So we did indeed have a plan, but the terrorist defeated it.
A follow-up, if I may.
Let me just say this. We recognize we got a problem right here, right? We're going to fix it. It is going to be a top priority as we go into the Super Bowl in Mardi Gras, and the solution that we're going to come up with is going to be a permanent one. It's going to be placed into the standard operating procedure of having major events and securing that quarter.
A follow-up, if I may. Obviously, Sugar Bowl postponed till tomorrow, but I'm sure after that game, a lot of people are going to want to celebrate. Are there plans to keep Bourbon Street closed? What does that look like?
So right now, Bourbon Street is an active crime scene, and the FBI is in charge of it. When they clear it, and it does not become an active crime scene anymore, we're going to open it up, potentially.
Olivia Dunn with Fox 8. Can we ask about this military police presence that you want to call it? Is this a private security like Blackwater? Also, would that be a first that a private security firm is mobilized to supplement local and state law enforcement?
No. We're not. This is our National Guard. Yeah. These are our citizens that we bring in. It's a military police company that we recognize. We need some more resources. We need some more boots on the ground because, again, what we're doing now is twofold. We've got an active investigation, and we've got to enhance security. Before this event, we were just enhancing and working on security. So we brought some additional resources.
Jesse Kirsch with NBC News. Thank you for holding this press briefing. I just want to clarify something first. You were just talking about bollards that are being repaired. Talk about a lift gate that are replaced and then a lift gate that's not been working. Was there a vehicle in place of that lift gate last night? Were there things in place of those bollards which are being repaired?
Sure. The chief spoke to the plan in place, and that is yes.
That was indeed.
So anything that is currently in the midst of being repaired had a backup replacement.
It had vehicles and officers were there where all of those ballasts have been. We had that. We knew. So we did have it. And like I said, in this particular case, terrorists just went all the way around up onto the sidewalk.
And for the lift gate, what about for the lift gate? Was there a vehicle like backing in and out to block that lift gate area, or was that just down and open? Because that's what we've heard from witnesses.
Captain. The reason I'm calling the captain, he's the captain over that district, and that is a question I'm going to let him address for you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Captain LaJean Roberts of the 8th District. Yes, we did have a vehicle strategically placed right in front of the wedge, preventing access onto the roadway.
And in terms of the framework of security that was already in place on Bourbon Street, I know this is an ongoing project of improvement, but with how that was all aligned, was someone getting up on a sidewalk considered impossible or nearly impossible, or was this not something you expected you would have to account for?
Of course, it wasn't something we expected to account for. The bollards they're actually wedges. They're strategically placed 5 locations throughout the French Quarter on the roadway. This particular terrorist drove onto the sidewalk behind the police car to gain access to the 100 block of Bourbon Street.
So if you're worried about someone ever driving down Bourbon Street, why weren't you worried about someone driving up the sidewalk in the same way, or at least bracing for you the same way for all the years?
All right, look. We can go on what ifs forever. This is evil. And that guy could have easily gone down the sidewalk of Canal Street, where there were a ton of pedestrians on there as well.
And there are
That's right.
on some sidewalks, so that's, I'm just asking.
Hold on a second. We're gonna move on. Chelsea, go ahead.
Just want you to know, however, we recognize, I said earlier, that where there are defects in this system, we are going to be transparent, and we are going to address them with the city and make sure that we fill those gaps as best we can. Yeah.
Yeah, Chelsea Grace with Axios. I have a question just about sort of ongoing public safety today. Special Agent mentioned 2 possible IEDs. Were those in the same location? Should residents in the French Quarter or elsewhere be concerned about potential other situations?
The 2 IEDs that were in different locations, and what we've done in conjunction with our local and state partners, we've gone through and done a sweep to identify anything that we thought was suspicious, and we have not. However, as I said before, if the public sees something, please reach out to us. That way we can go through and verify that we did not miss anything. But we conducted initial sweeps, I think, starting shortly after our initial
Yes, I'm going to thank you, Agent. I do want to share that we have a plan, and we have been implementing that plan. One of those plans is that we have swept all of these areas. The word swept means we have put officers out there as a grid, walking down the streets, every street in the French Quarter, looking for suspicious packages, bags, ice chests, you name it. And they have been walking it as a grid. We've been doing the same thing on Poydras and all the accesses into the Superdome. Part of the safety plan is we have bomb dogs out there sweeping the Superdome and all the exterior area, and we're locking that down. That will be locked down through the game tomorrow. So that's a part of that safety plan, and we've already been implementing it.
Okay, thank you all for coming out.
Question back here for the governor on the MPs. How many MPs will be deployed to New Orleans?
Right now, there's I think it's a General Freelo 100. 100. 100, and yeah. All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
What gives you the confidence tomorrow night it'll be safe riot?
I'm going to be there.
Yes, but you're also saying you're making improvements. Or what gives you the confidence?
Press conference in New Orleans in the face of New Year's Day tragedy. That's the only way to describe it. I want to summarize what we heard. The most important description came from Althea Duncan, the assistant special agent FBI in charge, saying that there are a range of suspects still being pursued by federal, state, and local authorities. That means that the terrorist so designated by the local and federal official Shamsud Din Jabbar, who drove a truck into the French Quarter, killing at least 10, injuring 35, did not act alone. Also, the 2 New Orleans police officers who engaged, 2 of the 3 who engaged in firing at the suspect, killing him at the scene, were wounded. They remain in good condition and will survive. The death toll may rise. The Attorney General for Louisiana said several of those injured in this vehicular attack are, quote, fighting for their lives. Also, the Sugar Bowl, due to kick off 7:45 p.m. local time tonight, has been postponed for 24 hours. That is, I think, the biggest summary of what we heard. Nicole Skenga, what else jumped out at you?
The headline that the FBI is pursuing associates aggressively should not be lost on viewers, that the police here believe the suspect did not act alone, and said that quite confidently, Major. We also learned that the suspect here was an Army veteran, that investigators believe he was honorably discharged. My associate, Pat Milton, has also reported this individual was driving a Ford Lightning, an electric truck. That is new information, perhaps speaks to how how quiet that vehicle was and how high-powered, high-charged it was. Also learning about some of the safety measures that have been put in place in the days and weeks ahead. The governor there saying that he has signed an emergency declaration he was intending to put into place tomorrow ahead of the Super Bowl and Mardi Gras. Now that is happening today. He has activated the military police company in addition to this, and I think, Scott McFarland can speak more to this, but it was interesting to learn about the bollards that were malfunctioning there and some of the precautions that police had perhaps put into place that did not live up to, expectations, and certainly in this case did not prevent this tragedy from happening.
Scott McFarland and Kirkpatrick, the police chief in New Orleans, saying they had a plan. The terrorists defeated it by driving up on the sidewalk and hurtling that vehicle down Bourbon Street.
Yeah, they didn't raise this issue unsolicited. They were asked questions about the bollard issue. We reported this morning that there's a bollard reconstruction project that's been underway for months now in New Orleans to get those things rebuilt and modernized from what they were a decade ago before the Super Bowl, which is there about a month from today. That project was incomplete. The bollards were, in fact, not fully functioning, and then they had alternative plans, the police cars, police officers, which may not have quite the capability or capacity of an actual security bollard. That project still needs to be completed, and they seem to be bullish on it getting done before the Super Bowl, but certainly wasn't ready for last night. But it wasn't just the law enforcement saying that there are likely accomplices. You heard that echoed by the other speakers at this news conference. It was Senator Kennedy who said it's wise to postpone the Sugar Bowl 24 hours. In his words, there's too much we don't know, and that it's just not worth it having it tonight. That may not instill a lot of confidence in the people of New Orleans right now, but he's certainly echoing what the FBI said. Also, the Congressman Troy Carter said there are cowards responsible for what happened this morning. And then the police chief saying, we have a plan. We're going to get these people. You hear the echoes of multiple people responsible.
Nicole, to your point, this is a multifaceted investigation. Joining us now on the phone, CBS News producer Elizabeth Campbell. She is at the Airbnb the attacker rented in New Orleans before this tragic homicidal event. Elizabeth, what can you tell us?
Well, Major, this is still an active scene that is ongoing. We have officials from FBI, from Bomb Squad, from HSI, Fire Department are all here. There is believed to potentially be more explosive in the house. They are waiting to figure that out. They're waiting for a search warrant to go in and confirm that. Out of a caution, they have evacuated all the residents in this residential area and the blocks surrounding that house. This is not how anyone want to be spending their New Year's Day. They're all stuck waiting. We saw one person who was trying to get back in to get their medication, but because the police don't know what is inside that house where the attacker was staying, they're not letting anyone back in yet. Everyone is still very much on edge, waiting to figure out what is inside there.
Elizabeth Campbell, thank you very much. Samantha Vinograd, CBS News national security contributor and former Assistant Secretary for Counterterrorism at the Department of Homeland Security, continues our conversation. Sam, it was mentioned at the press briefing that 2 improvised explosive devices, IEDs, were rendered safe at the scene, that there were sweeps of the surrounding area in order to make sure those in that area would be safe and that the security could be established clearly. But at this residence, this Airbnb, those fears remain pronounced.
They certainly do. And what authorities are doing right now is establishing a secure perimeter. And as time goes by, using a range of federal, state, and local bomb and explosive device tactics, are extending that secure perimeter as far as possible around Bourbon Street, and then, of course, going into this Airbnb and ensuring that there's no other explosive devices. I do want to note, based on the fact that this individual traveled all the way from Texas, we also must assume that authorities in Texas are searching this individual's home, securing it as well to ensure that there's no explosive devices, and also tracking anywhere else this individual may have stopped and planted IEDs. So the explosive detection work is really in its nascent stages. And that might be why, Major, it's so critical to note this, that authorities mentioned that this individual may not have acted alone. Now, I'm hearing differing accounts from law enforcement about whether they believe the threat is neutralized or not, but the law enforcement is clearly asking for the public's help to identify any potential leads in this case, not only because such a broad geographic area may be implicated.
And Sam, from your experience, thinking about that potentially large geographic space, how complex is this endeavor for the next 24 hours? And is it even wise for authorities to announce, well, the Sugar Bowl won't be tonight, but it will definitely be tomorrow?
I think it is hard at this stage in the investigation to indicate that stability and security will be recognized anytime in the near future. We just don't know right now based upon what the FBI briefed publicly. Now, I will note, the FBI has what they call joint terrorism task forces in all of their jurisdictions. So that includes, of course, both New Orleans as well as in various parts of Texas, including where this individual resided. Those joint terrorism task forces, which include a mix of federal, state, and local officials, are likely utilizing all available assets, pooling information, and trying to get a picture of anywhere the attacker may have visited or frequented that currently could be under threat. So it is a very complex situation and moment, and it is clear that authorities do not yet believe that the threat has been neutralized in Louisiana and potentially in other locations as well, but they're devoting all resources to try to neutralize that threat, Major.
Sam, please stand by. We want to show you surveillance video obtained by CBS News. It shows the pickup truck drive around a police car onto the sidewalk and speed up, plowing in to the terrified, disbelieving crowd. CBS News national reporter Katie Weiss is in New Orleans, where this press conference that just wrapped up occurred. She's joined by Louisiana Congressman Democrat Troy Carter. Katie?
Hi, Major. Yes, we just finished hearing a press conference, and Congressman, I want to hear your thoughts. So, what do you think about, the information that we know so far?
Well, it demonstrates a collective effort. Federal, state, and local governments working together, law enforcement utilizing all the resources at hand. The president is very clear that he is going to deploy every resource possible to put the full faith and credit of the United States behind apprehending these cowards and bringing them to justice, making sure that the city of New Orleans and the surrounding area is safe. Paramount to everything that we do is making sure that citizens are safe, making sure that our football game can go forward, but only in a way that is safe. And these cowards, they should know that there's no victory for them. There's no victory for them. We have FBI in charge on the ground. We've got Homeland Security. We got New Orleans Police Department. We've got the surrounding sheriffs and all law enforcement all working hand in hand to demonstrate that we will find you and bring you to justice. New Orleans is a strong city. Our state is resilient, and resources are here, as evident by everything you saw today, that we're going to leave no stone unturned.
Yeah, and talking about no stone left unturned, it sounds like there's still several suspects at this hour who, investigators are looking to track down. Can you speak a little bit to that? Should people in New Orleans be concerned about any further potential threats?
Well, we should always be concerned. We should never let our guards down, because we know terrorism is a real threat to our homeland. So we should always be ever vigilant, and we should always pay attention. However, we should also step back, be calm, let law enforcement do its job. We have the best of the best on the ground here to do just what they're trained to do, and that is to find these cowards, bring them to justice, and make sure that we're safe. We don't know all the facts. We know from evidence that's been turned out that there appears to be additional people that are part of this plot. We're going to find them. To share much more than that would threaten the sanctity of the investigation. So I'd ask you and all of our citizens to just trust us that they're working feverishly.
Now, the executive order that the governor talked about today, what exactly does that do? How does that help with that investigation?
The declaration of emergency unlocks the full faith and credit of the federal government. The president has already given that. This is yet another example of all hands on deck working together to make sure that all of those resources of Homeland Homeland Security, FBI, DOJ, resources are here to protect the Sugar Bowl, Super Bowl, and ongoing events. We know that we'll have thousands of visitors that will come to Louisiana, and more specifically to New Orleans. It's important that we let the public out there know when you come to visit here, you will be safe.
I guess final question for you, sir. You know, the Super Bowl is a big event that's coming up on everyone's minds. How do you think the events this morning that have been unraveling are shaping any changes in your approach to the Super Bowl?
It certainly redoubles our efforts. We've had belts and suspenders on. Now we'll have trap wires. We'll make sure that all the resources are in place. New Orleans is no different than any other major city when there's a national event that's going to go on. And so we already had those systems employed. Now we're going to retighten the hatches and make sure that we redouble our effort, look at every possible way. Like it was discovered today that although there were bollards on Bourbon Street and a car in place, maybe we also need to do something to block vehicles from jumping the sidewalk and getting around. Each situation provides us an opportunity to learn from it, and as the governor said, whatever's broken will be fixed.
An opportunity to learn. We're certainly going to continue to find more information and keep you posted as we learn more today. I've been following the story truthfully from the very minute that it happened. I was in the French Quarter this morning when this took place, so my heart goes out to everyone who witnessed the tragedy today. We're going to keep you updated as we learn more. We'll send it back to you, Major.
Katie Weiss, thank you very much, and our thanks to Congressman Troy Carter. Top of the hour, let's reset what we know. The Assistant Special Agent, FBI, in charge in New Orleans, Athea Duncan, told us about an hour ago that 42-year-old Shamsud Din Jabbar, the principal suspect in this homicidal event in the French Quarter, Bourbon Street to be precise, that killed at least 10 people about 3:15 a.m. local time, New Year's morning, did not act alone, and that there are a range of suspects federal and state authorities are looking for. That suspect, Shamsud Din Jabbar, born in the United States, age 42, Army veteran, honorably discharged, at least authorities so believe at this hour. 3 New Orleans police officers engaged in fire with that suspect, Shamsud Din Jabbar, who was wearing body armor. He died at the scene. 2 of those police officers with the New Orleans Police Department wounded. They are, according to the mayor, doing well and will recover fully. Some 35 others were injured. The Attorney General of Louisiana said some of them at this hour are fighting for their lives, and we should possibly anticipate that the death toll could rise above the confirmed number, which is presently 10. Also, for college football fans, the Sugar Bowl, scheduled for a 7:45 local time p.m. kickoff tonight, postponed, according to officials, for 24 hours. That resets what we know, the biggest, most important details. Also, we just talked to Elizabeth Campbell, one of our producers, at the scene of this Airbnb rented by the suspect. It is now the subject, Nicole Skanga, of an extensive investigation and the possible threat of explosive devices there, requiring at least a block-wide evacuation in that neighborhood.
Yeah, that search warrant issued and granted expediently, Major, and we've heard from on-the-ground reporting that there is ATF, FBI teams on the scene, K-9 teams on the scene moving forward. Of course, we know there are 400 members of the New Orleans police, and that is important because they have swept this entire area, in addition to the 4 improvised explosive devices that were found on the suspect's rented vehicle, that Ford Lightning that we saw drive into crowds. There were 2 other improvised explosives found in different locations in the area. Police saying moments ago that those have been rendered safe. But of course, this fear among, city-goers, visitors, and residents of New Orleans moving forward. In addition to that, Major, you underscored it. Everyone here within federal and state law enforcement, local law enforcement, speaking as to possible other associates. And so we're going to see police not only visit the Airbnb, perhaps the suspect's home back in Texas, but also, his friends, his family members, the folks who might have known more about this.
In matters of this kind, there is a science that has been developed over decades. The FBI really masterminded that science. It's called profiling. And a former senior FBI criminal profiler, Mary Ellen O'Toole, joins us on the phone with her thoughts about that science and what we may, at this early stage, if anything, be able to glean from the facts so presented. Mary Ellen?
Thank you for having me on. Yes, as I listened to it, to the complete press conference, several things struck me, and one of them was because they did seem to get it wrong earlier today when they implied that this offender may have acted alone. For them now to come and say that there's the likelihood of multiple offenders that are involved, this would not have been based on just assumption or investigative intuition. So in this kind of a case, I believe that one of the things that they've done is they brought in the forensic evidence so that they can look at, for example, with the IEDs that have been located there in the vehicle and at the scene, does it appear as though that they have been created or built by the same person? Bombers have different signatures. So they also can do some forensic analysis pretty quickly. Whose fingerprints were on the components with the IED? Do they match the suspect, or are there multiple fingerprints? What about the DNA inside the truck? Does it come back obviously to the driver, but maybe to other people as well? Or are they looking at the cameras, which they are, in terms of who else would have been around the B&B or around the area where the offender got access to the truck? So they will be looking at also computer intelligence. Who is this offender communicating with? So I think at this point, to justify that they're saying that it's likely there are multiple offenders or people involved in this, they're bringing in forensic evidence to back up those statements.
Mary Ellen O'Toole, please stand by. That's some vital insight you just provided to us. I want to thank you for that. Rodney Harrison is a CBS News law enforcement contributor and former Suffolk County, New York Police Department Commissioner. Rodney, your thoughts building on what Mary Ellen just told our audience about things that are probably being pursued but can't be talked about openly just yet.
Yeah, so I totally agree. And there's a lot more of a concern that I have on the surface regarding there's other potential suspects involved with this incident that happened in New Orleans. And that leads me to believe, is this something that other municipalities need to have a concern about? You know, is this something that just touches New Orleans or Texas? Or is this something where other cities, large cities that are having events need to also have a concern? So my concern is, I know the investigation needs to be methodical, but we need to get as much information out as possible so other cities or states need to be prepared just in case there's other plots going on throughout the country.
Rodney, based on what you just said, would you expect in short order some type of bulletin to be sent out by federal or state authorities to other jurisdictions that might need to be on a higher state of alert?
And once again, we're still in the infantile stages of the investigation, but as soon as we get as much information after the search warrants, be it the Airbnb, be it his residence in Texas or other locations, a bulletin does need to be shared so everybody can put things in place. Other law enforcement agencies could put things in place to protect their citizens through these holidays.
Rodney, Mary Ellen O'Toole talked to us about the way the IEDs, the improvised explosive devices, might have been constructed, DNA. Based on your experience, how quick is the turnaround from discovery to conclusion or leads in a situation like this?
Well, it could be anything within 24 to 48 hours to a week. It all depends on what's on file, if there is DNA on file or other types of technological information that we can use to try to get as much information to the other suspects that were involved. You know, unfortunately, these things don't happen overnight. We have to submit a lot of sciences to the labs and make sure they put this on the top of the pile of their research and make sure the information gets back to the law enforcement agencies so now we can put things in place to protect other plots that may be potentially occurring throughout the country.
Rodney, this may seem like a very simple question, but to avoid detection, would you assume that this suspect and anyone who might be associated with the suspect wanted to stay under the radar, meaning not rent a car from a rental car agency, use Airbnb, not a hotel, to, if not immediately avoid detection, make detection either before or after a bit more difficult?
So I'm not sure what the role of the other suspects were. Are they also involved in some type of plotting and looking to commit some act of violence, or were they just behind the scenes helping this subject get a vehicle, provide him these explosive devices and other things? I was told that he had a long gun with a silencer. So what their role is undetermined at this time. But I will say this, I know the investigation is in the beginning phases, but they need to get to the bottom of it as quickly as possible to identify those suspects, to make sure that they are apprehended as quickly as possible.
Rodney Harrison, please stand by. I want to go back to CBS News national reporter Katie Weiss, who's now with the New Orleans City Council member Eugene Green. Katie?
Good afternoon, Major. Yes, Councilman, I wanted to talk with you a little bit more about some of the safety issues that came up during the news conference this afternoon. There was a question about the bollards, or for those at home watching who aren't familiar with those, type of barrier that's put up to try to keep folks in a pedestrian-only zone safer. Yeah. Can you talk to us a little bit about what went wrong with those? What kind of improvements were pending still in time for the Super Bowl with those?
Well, the simple improvement was going to be that they were going to be a bit more efficient and less prone to mechanical issues. But it's important to recognize that there was a police car in place in front of the area where the bollard should be, and this terrorist chose to simply go around it. It's also important to recognize that the terrorists could have entered the French Quarter and even Bourbon Street from side streets. Not all of them are protected by a bollard. So it's just important to recognize that, yes, certainly that's a desirable development to have the bollard in place, but that alone does not explain why a terrorist was able to go onto the sidewalk and run down the sidewalk and kill people, because even bollards would have their limitations there. This was somebody who was just hell-bent on killing other people, and if he hadn't gone down that street with those bollards, he would have gone on a side street like Iberville or Dumaine or some other street like that.
For you, witnessing this event unravel this morning, how has that shifted your focus as a city council person?
Well, as a city council person, I see so much. Unfortunately, I see good and the bad. I see a lot of good. We host a lot of events that go off without incident. We just hosted Taylor Swift 3 days of 50,000 people at the concerts. We've hosted Super Bowls. In fact, this is going to be our 11th Super Bowl. We host Mardi Gras. We host the Sugar Bowl and other events. So, unfortunately, to the nation, maybe they don't feel as comfortable coming to the city. But I will tell you that we are a safe city, and that we do a good job in terms of security on major events. Again, I emphasize this to say how important it is to recognize that someone who is hell-bent on killing other people, especially in this instance, so diabolical that he chose to use a truck to run over people, teenagers, people having a good time, because that's all that was going on Bourbon Street last night or early in the morning, was people having a good time. So it was a strike at humanity. But in this instance, nothing was achieved, because, there's going to be a Sugar Bowl game tomorrow. There are families who are hurting, but the city of New Orleans or the nation is not about to change its government structure because of a terrorist incident like that. It's an unfortunate fact as to what happened, but the bottom line is that as a city, we're still a safe city to visit.
You talked about this being a terrorist event. I think one of the most interesting details that came out of this news conference just now this afternoon was the FBI official confirming about information on the suspect's vehicle, that the truck did have an ISIS flag attached to the back of the truck at the time of the attack, and that there are still other alleged accomplices that potentially are still at large at this time. What are your thoughts? How does that resonate with you, knowing those new details?
Well, I feel very confident that the local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies working together are going to get to the bottom of this and to arrest those who are responsible. One party is deceased already. One terrorist is deceased. There may have been accomplices. But the bottom line is that I feel that this is yet another test of our law enforcement community, but I'm very confident that members of the New Orleans Police Department, working with our state and federal partners, are going to do a thorough investigation. There's going to be an arrest, and somebody's going to pay a severe price.
Someone might pay a severe price. surprised. You heard it. We'll continue to keep you updated as we learn more information. Major?
Katie Weiss and Eugene Green, member of the New Orleans City Council, thank you very much. Sam Vinograd, I want to come back to you. As I understand it, the FBI has done some consultative briefing with relevant agencies. What can you tell us?
Well, what I can tell you is that after the vehicular attack in Germany on December 20th, the Department of Homeland Security did issue a bulletin to law enforcement partners warning about the threat of vehicular incidents. Today, the Federal Bureau of Investigation did a call with its law enforcement partners that includes both state and local law enforcement partners as well as law enforcement associations and counterterrorism officials to brief them on where things stand at this moment. Major, in my experience, these law enforcement partner calls are typical after a mass casualty or significant potential terrorism-related event. This is standard operating procedure. The FBI did conduct that call to share what they know at this time, and also to encourage law enforcement partners around the country to remain vigilant for any associated threats. Those associated threats could be related to the actual attacker in this case. Perhaps he was in touch with others about perpetuating similar attacks, or others typically are inspired by high-profile mass casualty events and may seek to implement attacks of their own. So this is a tense moment for the country, and that is why law enforcement across the country is being encouraged to operate at the highest level of vigilance to prevent more destruction and more violence.
Sam Vinograd, thank you very much. Nicole Skanger, your thoughts?
Yeah, one thing we should point out here, Major Shamsuddin Jabbar, the suspect here, the FBI assailant in this attack, may have had help carrying out this attack. Our colleague Andy Trier reporting that the number of IEDs, improvised explosive devices, left around the scene in the French Quarter are a big clue here, and that some of these were serious enough, as we heard moments ago in that press conference, for federal agents to have rendered them safe. Speaking with senior law enforcement officials and other sources here, they're telling me that investigators are now combing through video, trying to identify if there are other people connected to those improvised explosive devices that police have found in the surrounding area.
Meaning scanning video to see if there's anything that they could detect from that video about the placement thereof, or by
placement
whom.
Or by who placed them, Major. And beyond that, you know, we heard earlier from our contributor, there's certainly going to be forensic analysis of those bombs, of those improvised devices, to determine were there any fingerprints, and what's more, what were the signatures on the bombs like? Were the people behind them or the person behind them, you know, the same maker there, Major? That's a big clue for investigators now.
When you say signatures, does that mean component parts that can be traced to other previous
component
events?
Parts, ingredients, the building blocks of these explosive devices?
Scott, it was said at the press briefing by Senator Kennedy that eventually federal authorities will clarify what they know. And if they don't, he said he will raise fresh hell. I don't know if he was intending to or not, but that seemed to serve to imply that he's not yet convinced federal authorities will be as forthcoming as he would expect or demand in this matter.
Intentionally or unintentionally, Senator Kennedy, speaking at that news conference, expressed some cynicism about the FBI's truthfulness and transparency. And what you had there is, I think by all of our experiences, that was a very untraditional crisis communication news conference. All those different voices, no uniformity in message, no uniformity in information stream. And you had people at some parts of that news conference trying to instill confidence in people. Come back tomorrow for the Sugar Bowl. The governor says he'll be there. You can feel safe. We want you in the French Quarter. Then you had Senator Kennedy say he's glad they postponed it tonight because it's not worth it. We're not sure what the risk is right now, which kind of runs counter to everybody should feel safe. You had the police chief saying that there were some issues they've got to button up. Issues with the bollard that the mayor mentioned are still trying to be repaired, the safety bollards to protect people on foot. So I think charitably, you had some inconsistent messaging about safety today. A couple things I want to mention. Other police departments undoubtedly are going to step up some of their protection of their pedestrian areas. CBS News has learned the Washington, D.C. Police Department, ahead of some major events here this month, major events, is increasing its visible enforcement today. indefinitely, and people will notice the difference. I expect to hear that from other police departments, but also this update from our affiliate KHOU in Houston, that law enforcement from Houston is now visible outside the attacker's home there, and it's a property with multiple dwellings on it, trailers or some improvised dwellings in addition to some type of home. They're there. That's totally customary. When an attacker is deceased, to go to that person's home, find out what you can. We saw that in July in Butler, Pennsylvania. One of the first stops was in Pennsylvania to the gunman's home to see what the computers show, what any people who live there can say. If they're looking for accomplices, it's a good place to start.
As part of our continuing coverage, we want to show you again surveillance video that CBS News has obtained. If you watch closely, it shows the pickup truck drive around a police car onto the sidewalk and speed up, plowing into the crowd. Former senior FBI criminal profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole joins us on the phone. Forgive me. I want to turn now to CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Ed, you are joining us from West Palm Beach, Florida, I believe. Former President-elect Trump has weighed in on this, sometimes accurately, sometimes less than accurately. What can you tell us?
Yeah, well, we're tracking, in essence, the current and the future president, Major. We know, for example, let's start with the current one, that President Biden is at Camp David. There's still a possibility we'll hear from him again later today. When he arrived there earlier today from his home in Delaware, he told reporters that he had real feelings of anger and frustration about all of this. And in his written statement this morning, he was among the first to signal that this might have been a broader operation, more than just one person acting alone, by saying in his statement at the time that he was directing his teams to continue making sure that there were no other perpetrators involved and that there was no remaining threat of any kind. That was notable for him to put in a written statement like that, signaling that there was still concern that we've now heard conveyed by those local and federal officials. Here in Florida, President-elect Trump is at his golf course at this hour, as he is most days during the daylight hours. He did speak out earlier today and implied some things that are not accurate. First, he suggested that, all of his warnings about crime going up in this country have been proven again with this situation, and then suggested that criminals coming in are far worse than the criminals we have in our country. So he was suggesting that this might have been some foreigner who had come into the United States to commit this act. We now know, of course, it was a U.S. citizen, an Army veteran, somebody who lived in Texas who had committed this act. But he added, our hearts are with all of the innocent victims and their loved ones, including the brave officers of the New Orleans Police Department. Notably, he says the Trump administration will fully support the city of New Orleans as they investigate and recover from this act of pure evil. The other thing to keep in mind, Major, we've got indications today that the Biden White House and its national security and homeland security apparatus has been in touch with the Trump national security and homeland security teams based here in Florida. That was a promise both sides made several weeks ago, that there would be conversations held in tandem about things ongoing that they would likely inherit. If you're looking for an example of the need for an outgoing and an incoming administration to be talking to each other several weeks before an inauguration, we now have one. But we have indications that they are in touch with each other so that the president-elect is kept abreast of the situation. We're not currently expecting him to say anything more about this later today. And again, we do expect President Biden might have more to say later today from Camp David. Major.
Ed O'Keefe, thank you. And building on Ed's point, if indeed we are notified of remarks from President Biden at Camp David, we, of course, will bring them to you. Mary Ellen O'Toole still on the phone with us. I'm very grateful that she is there. Mary Ellen, you're a former FBI criminal profiler. Based on your experience and your knowledge of the very early stages that this investigation is quite obviously in, what's going on behind the scenes? And how much less is the public being appropriately informed of that the FBI and other relevant authorities may already know?
So great question. So behind the scenes, more than likely what they're doing, the behavioral analysis unit, my old unit, they're doing both a timeline and a personality assessment of the truck driver. And by that, I mean they're going back and they're tracking where was he a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and so forth. They're also doing an in-depth assessment of his life. At what point in his life did he have an ongoing involvement in criminal behavior, or was there a point in his life that he made the decision to become antisocial, having been pro-social, in other words, abiding by the laws for most of his life. That becomes a critical period of time because that may be where he decided to participate or spearhead this lethal attack. And it had to be such a powerful event in his life to make this decision because he became both homicidal and suicidal. That's huge for somebody that has been pro-social or law-abiding before that. So that's why the timeline, when did this happen, and the personality assessment, what was going on in his life, becomes so critical. That also will give agents much more information on who was he talking to, who was he working with, who was he living with, who are the other people that were influencing him. And at this point, they've already got this information. They're putting it together. This is not what they can release to the public at this point, because if it gets out there, somebody that was a close associate of his may start destroying evidence. And that's one of the most profoundly important reasons that you can't give out Joe Blow 1 and Joe Blow 2's names, because they still have to collect evidence. They still have to do interviews with possible other suspects. So it's frustrating, but there's a reason for it.
Mary Ellen, you mentioned this suspect, homicidal and suicidal. Though he wore body armor, he had to know, according to what you just shared with our audience, that he was going to die in this attack.
I think that he reasonably, because he's older, he's not in his early 20s where the thinking is a lot more flawed. At that point in his life, he had to consider the fact that he was planning to be homicidal, but suicidology or suicide was also a possibility.
Mary Ellen O'Toole, thank you very much. I want to go back to New Orleans, where New Orleans Council member Oliver Thomas is standing by with our Katie Weiss. Katie?
Yeah, Major, I've been talking with Councilman Thomas here about a very touching account that he has to share from his time visiting patients in the hospital this morning. Councilman, thank you for your time. Tell us a little bit about what you've experienced, what you saw.
We've heard a lot about what happened with the perpetrator and the terror and the violence that actually affected this city, this country, and this event. But very little have we talked about the human side of what happened with the victims and the two officers who were shot at the emergency room. And in my time in the emergency room this morning, to see the families and to talk to them and to see the care from our medical emergency professionals has been exemplary at University Hospital. But there was one touching story with a young woman who came by in her uniform because she was coming to check on her comrade, someone she had been through the academy with, someone she was friends with. And it was a tearful exchange to see her concern was getting to where someone who she graduated the police academy with, who was a fellow officer. And she actually talked about being on assignment with them, but actually being sent to do something else. And then just to see the medical emergency officials recognize how heroic those officers were, that had they not put their lives on the line, potentially thousands more, hundreds more people could have been killed or hurt.
So they truly were heroes in this.
Definitely, truly. It's an example of how fortunate we are to have the men and women of the New Orleans Police Department, and how sometimes that we take them for granted, but we shouldn't take them for granted. You know, and in many cases, they don't think about whether they're being appreciated or not. They think about making sure our families and our businesses are first and safe, and that's what these officers did.
Could you describe a little bit about those moments when they were injured, how they acted so heroically?
Yeah, and people need to know that this perpetrator went around the barricades, went around officers, plowing through the crowd or the street, and these officers went towards him, confronted him, put their lives on the line. That story has not been told enough. And yes, this is a tragic event, but we have two folk who could have lost their lives. We had another officer who wasn't injured, but the two who were in the emergency room this morning with their families, healing from their gunshots and their wounds. And we need to make sure that they're recognized appropriately.
And those two officers, how are they doing right now? Do you know when they'll leave the hospital?
Well, no, I don't. I haven't gotten any updates. When I left to start all this other stuff that we've been doing about the event, one of the officers finally fell asleep. As a matter of fact, he asked Police Chief Kirkpatrick if somebody, I think, could bring him a Sprite, 7-Up. He was there with his wife and family members and other officers. He fell asleep. And the young officer whose family comes from the neighborhood where I grew up in, he was with his dad, who is also a member of law enforcement with another agency, just smiling, worrying about his fiancée. His fiancée was frantic, and she was just concerned about him. And they're about to get married, right? But to see his dad there comforting him, and he was upbeat, he was sitting up, and the other officer finally got some rest.
Wow, that's really, really touching accounts. Thank you so much for sharing that today. We appreciate it. We'll continue to keep you updated on the status of those two heroic folks today, and we'll also let you know the status of other patients that we know were also transported to the hospital. For now, we'll send it back to you, Major.
Katie Weiss, and our thanks to Oliver Thomas, member of the New Orleans City Council. It's now 3:30 on the East Coast, 12:30 on the West, 2:30 in New Orleans. Let's recap where we stand. The latest on the deadly New Orleans truck attack New Year's morning this year, just hours and hours ago. The FBI says the suspect, 42-year-old Shamsud Din Jabbar from Texas, rammed his pickup truck into a crowd before being shot to death by police in what has been described as a volley of back-and-forth gunfire. At least 10 people on that scene were killed. That death toll may rise, we don't know, but at 10 is the confirmed number presently. 35 injured. The Attorney General of Louisiana has said some of those 35 injured are, quote, fighting for their lives. Investigators say they believe Jabbar did not act alone. They found an ISIS flag on the truck and several explosives inside his vehicle. Those explosives were known as improvised explosive devices. This incident is being investigated as an act of terrorism. Earlier, New Orleans Police Superintendent said this is not just an act of terrorism, this is evil. The FBI is the lead investigative agency into this morning's deadly truck attack. Here's what we heard earlier from the FBI Assistant Special Agent in charge.
The FBI is the lead investigative agency, and we're investigating this as an attack of terrorism along with our partners. Today at approximately 3:15 a.m. Central Standard Time, an individual drove a pickup truck into a crowd on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, killing at least 10 individuals and injuring dozens more. After hitting the crowd, he exited the vehicle and fired upon local law enforcement. Law enforcement returned fire, and the subject was pronounced deceased at the scene. 2 law enforcement officers were injured and transported to local hospitals. The subject has been identified as 42-year-old Shamsud Din Jabbar, a U.S.-born citizen from Texas. He was driving a Ford pickup truck, which appears to be rented, and we are working to confirm how the subject came in possession of this vehicle. An ISIS flag was located on the trailer hitch of the vehicle, and the FBI is working to determine the subject's potential associations and affiliations with terrorist organizations. Weapons and potential improvised explosive devices, IEDs, were located in the subject's vehicle. Other potential IEDs were also located in the French Quarter. As of now, 2 IEDs have been found and rendered safe. The FBI Special Agent bomb technicians, as well as our local law enforcement partners, have been working to determine if any of these devices are viable, and they will work to render those devices safe. The FBI, we are working with our partners to investigate this as an act of terrorism. We're aggressively running down all of the leads to identify the possible subject's associates. We're working to ensure that there is no further threat. We do not believe that Jabbar was solely responsible. We are aggressively running down every lead, including those of his known associates. That's why we need the public's help. We are asking if anybody has any interactions with Shamsud Din Jabbar in the last 72 hours, that you contact us. The FBI is asking the public's help. We're asking anyone who has information, video, or pictures to provide it to the FBI. We have set up a digital tip line as well as our 1-800 number, 1-800-CALL-FBI. please provide us with any information that can assist us in this investigation. Once again, thank you for your patience and assistance. For an updated statement or information, please check the FBI's website and our social media accounts.
That was the voice of Althea Duncan. She is the assistant special agent in charge of the FBI in New Orleans, briefing reporters about an hour and a half ago. Joining us now, CBS News producer Elizabeth Campbell. She is at the Airbnb the attacker rented in New Orleans, where there is a sizable law enforcement presence. Elizabeth.
Major, good to be with you. You heard there the investigation is ongoing and the situation is ongoing here. It is very tense. Earlier this morning, there was some smoke seen from the house where the attacker was staying in an Airbnb. They have now evacuated residents. If you can see, if you look down that street, there is a large presence, as you said. As they wait to enter the house, there is bomb squad, FBI, HSI. This is an all-hands-on-deck situation as they wait to try to enter that property to clear any potential IEDs, improvised explosive that they may find, and secure this area. Residents are frustrated. It has been going on for hours. It will continue to go on for hours, and the situation here is tense.
Elizabeth, based on what you can observe, and I know that there may be some limitations there, do you believe that authorities have entered the property or are still preparing to do that?
They are still preparing to do that. We've heard they are waiting on a search warrant before they can enter the property, and that is part of the reason why this is a continued long affair. Of when it will end is unclear.
Elizabeth Campbell on the scene for us. Thank you very much. Nicole Skanga and Scott McFarland joined me here at the table. Nicole, your thoughts based on what we've heard so far and the things still yet to come.
Yeah, Major, very concerning that law enforcement has not ruled out a future threat. You heard the FBI assistant special agent in charge say there, quote, "We are working to ensure no future threat." And the kickoff time delay by 24 hours is an indication of that. It will be interesting to see if kickoff remains at 8:45 p.m. tomorrow.
Of the Sugar Bowl.
Of the Sugar Bowl, that game between University of Georgia and Notre Dame. This is going to be a huge concern, copycat attacks for law enforcement moving forward. They are tracking many pieces here, a vehicle ramming, potential improvised explosive devices. Past his prologue in politics, it is in Homeland Security too. And on December 23rd, you heard Sam Vinograd mention it before, after that horrific ramming vehicle attack at the German Christmas market, there was a law enforcement bulletin that went out to all law enforcement across the country, warning that lone offenders pose the most likely threat of violence to soft targets during the winter holidays. That bulletin here that is in front of me, warning that lone offenders are most likely to target publicly accessible places with perceived lower levels of security, large holiday gatherings and events. It mentions simple tactics, including improvised explosive devices and vehicle ramming. This terrible nightmare now has played out in New Orleans, and certainly officials are going to be concerned in the days and months ahead with so many high-profile security events, the Super Bowl happening in New Orleans, the inauguration coming up, looking forward to the World Cup, to the Olympics. How are they going to secure the nation's cities to ensure that they can lock them down? And the real answer, Major, is that there is no possible way to lock down a city entirely. Speaking with former law enforcement officials today, they say it is truly a tough task. But you're going to see some of those renovation projects, like the one that was underway in New Orleans, play out in other major cities across the United States moving forward. Mark my word.
Scott, catch up our audience on something you mentioned a moment ago about Washington, D.C., preparations for the inauguration, possibly a rally by President-elect Trump the day before the inauguration, downtown Washington, D.C. That's a complicated event under the most normal circumstances.
Yeah.
This tragedy in New Orleans adds another layer of complication.
And the Washington, D.C. police say they've already increased their visible police presence. That adds to whatever's happening behind the scenes that is invisible to us. We know there are these seminal moments coming up in Washington, D.C. that will draw a crowd or security concerns, several of them in just the next few weeks. January 20th will draw hundreds of thousands of people. That's going to be a little bit different. That's a national security, Homeland Security designated event. It comes with a dome of security and a fortress-like atmosphere. January 6th, they're going to do the same thing, even though it's just the certification of electoral votes because of what happened the last time they did that. They're bringing that same Homeland Security apparatus that's going to be massive in scope and size. But what about the days in between when you have, for example, as CBS News reported first today, Donald Trump expected to speak at a rally at an arena downtown, January 19th, when you have crowds gathered here for any number of reasons before and after all those events I just described, you're going to sense that. But I was really struck, Nicole and Major, by how much time was spent at that New Orleans news conference talking not about the attack this morning, but about the security confidence people should have going to the Sugar Bowl tomorrow. And you heard the governor when asked, well, what assurances do we have that we're going to be secure if there are potentially accomplices and a larger scheme? And his response was, because I'm going to the game. They spent an awful lot of time trying to instill confidence for the Sugar Bowl and for the Super Bowl. But the rest of the message today, that there may be others out there, that there were IEDs, that there may have been a larger scheme, may take more than just the governor's attendance to reinstill confidence.
Thank you very much, Scott. I want to bring back into our conversation Rodney Harrison, CBS News law enforcement contributor. Rodney, for the audience sifting through all this, hearing our conversation here at the desk, hearing from subject experts like yourself, trying to sift the most important things learned so far, how would you prioritize them and how would you help them comprehend both the risks and the next steps?
So let me just touch about the next steps, and there's going to be a host of different search warrants that are going to be performed at different residence locations, computers, cell phones, social media scrubs. Then there's a hotline that the FBI agent produced. They're going to have to go through any tips that are provided. But the one thing that I would like to see going forward is an image of this individual. There's somebody out there that has seen this individual go into a store or be around a certain people, maybe be at a certain religious institution that can help us identify other individuals that he is involved with. So these are probably going to be the next steps going forward. This is not just going to be the job of the FBI and the New Orleans Police Department. This is going to be some type of assistance from everybody in this country to try to get eyes on this incident, see who's involved, and make sure they report it to the authorities.
Rodney, it's sometimes said in casual conversation that we are an over-surveilled society, that there are police cameras or governmental cameras in lots of different places. Some jurisdictions, like New York City, make a kind of public show of that. This is a surveillance part of this investigation. There is a surveillance part of this investigation. You mentioned photographs of this individual, this suspect, 42-year-old Shamsuddin Jabbar. Surveillance cameras might have them already.
Yes, and that's going to help us or the investigating agencies be able to determine the actions of Mr. Jabbar prior to this incident, how he plotted things out, where he was days before this incident. And then once again is this, he's no longer with us, but there are still people that are outstanding that we need to identify. So capturing any type of video or any other intelligence that can help us identify those individuals will be extremely helpful to put a close to this incident.
Rodney, you heard a moment ago our Elizabeth Campbell, who's near the scene of this Airbnb where a search warrant is in process and authorities want to enter that property, probably cautiously for some realistic fear that there might be something either set there or booby-trapped. Talk to us based on your experience about what that part of the investigation will and should look like.
Well, I'm hoping that the investigators involved before they go inside this location, knowing that there were explosive devices recovered from the vehicle, that they use some type of sniff bomb dogs to go in prior to their entrance of the search warrant and make sure that everything is clear and there's no other explosive devices anywhere in any residence or business that they may have to conduct a search warrant in. So it's important that they use these canines to sniff out any potential explosive devices going further to make sure that nobody else gets hurt.
Is it your assumption, and I understand that I'm using the word assumption, Rodney, but based on your experience, that Airbnb may have a lot or a little evidence for investigators?
Well, whatever little bit of evidence that can be retrieved is going to be instrumental. Regarding how much, the time will be able to tell us that. But these are the little methodical steps that I shared earlier that are going to help us identify other subjects involved with this incident and bring them to justice as well.
Do you glean anything in terms of the quote-unquote sophistication? And I don't mean to use that as a compliment. I just mean that as a multi-layered plot involving not only a ramming incident, but improvised explosive devices, not only in the vehicle, but in the surrounding area. Does that tell you anything important about how premeditated this was?
Well, you just take a look at him wearing a body armor, him going around the police vehicle and going on the sidewalk during this time frame, getting an Airbnb, him being from Texas. There was a lot of plotting involved. Once I first heard about this incident, I actually automatically assumed that he did not perform this act by himself. That's why I stated there's a little bit more of a concern just on the surface. And the other people that are out there that are involved, are they on the run now? And what's going to be the mechanism to make sure that we bring them to justice and hold them accountable? So there's a lot more work that needs to be done through just getting information and tips to recovering video that can show what actions he was performing prior to this incident, to whatever sciences that they can recover from inside the Airbnb, the location in Texas, or anything else that's connected to Mr. Jabbar.
Rodney Harrison, thank you very much. I want to turn back to our CBS national reporter, Katie Weiss, in New Orleans. Katie, as you mentioned earlier, you're not just our reporter on the scene. You were in the French Quarter this morning when this deadly act of terrorism played out. As much as you can, and as gently as you can, take us through what you saw and heard. Paint that picture.
Major, thank you. It's been a long morning, a long day, and it's not just for myself, but for many of the law enforcement, hundreds of law enforcement officers who responded, and the EMTs who ran to the rescue, for the Good Samaritans that were there, the employees of the bars and clubs along Bourbon that witnessed this, their friends, families, tourists, locals alike who were there at this time. It's been a long day for all of us. What I witnessed, I heard some commotion. I stepped into a bar along Bourbon, like many others, and I heard that there had been a shooting. So I went up to the second floor window to try to get a better vantage point, and I saw there several people on the ground across Bourbon Street who were injured in varying capacities. I saw first responders rendering aid to someone who was on the ground, seemingly unconscious. I spoke with some witnesses who had also ducked into this bar and asked them what they had seen. One woman told me that she and her husband saw the truck drive past. In fact, her husband, she said, the truck clipped her husband's ankle, but fortunately he was able to move out of the way in time. She said that they ducked into this bar for cover and were just, trying to figure out what else was going on, but that they, as soon as the truck went through, she said she heard kind of a loud crashing noise when the truck hit something, and then she heard shots ring out. She said it was multiple rapid fire type shots. We know now that a long gun was recovered at the scene, so it certainly kind of, aligns with those kinds of witness accounts that I heard there. Once we were allowed to leave the bar, police had kind of created a corral for all of us to leave the scene, the area of Bourbon, and as we were leaving, I saw bodies strewn across this block of Bourbon Street where I was, seeking cover, and it was pretty horrific. There was blood all over the street. There were people worried for their loved ones, comforting their loved ones. There were people trying to render aid, CPR. There were people being lifted up into gurneys, onto stretchers, and we were corralled out of the way. Police just, at the time, I was trying to record to get some, to get a better picture of what was going on. The police said, no time to record, just keep on going, and they motioned us to safety. And now knowing that there were explosive devices in that area, I know for myself, that's pretty unsettling. Anything could have happened. For many people who were there to learn that, certainly very unsettling to learn that as well. We are grateful. I know I'm grateful to be able to be here and give you this report, Major.
Katie, I just want to ask you, 3:15 a.m., in some American cities, after the clock strikes midnight and everyone has said Happy New Year, crowds tend to dissipate. But New Orleans prides itself, understandably, as a 24/7 city that likes to party. What was the size of the contingent at that time, 3 a.m., as compared to midnight?
Sure. I used to live in Denver, and at 2 a.m., all the bars close. That's definitely not the case in New Orleans. New Orleans is a unique place where they want you to have fun. Laissez les bon temps rouler, let the good times roll. It's the Mardi Gras, word, the Mardi Gras phrase, if you will, that everyone lives by here. At 3 a.m., that's really the peak hour that people are out and about. So there were a lot of folks that were walking around Bourbon. This is a pedestrian-only area. So there were tons of people on the street at that hour who were excited, having a good time, carefree, ringing in the new year, certainly not expecting something as horrific as this.
Katie Weiss, thank you very, very much. I want to bring in Omar Villafranca, who was at the scene, or as close as he can get as a reporter to the scene where the driver began his deadly attack. Omar?
Well, Major, where we're standing right now, this is Canal Street, just over my shoulder over here. This is Canal right here. Right there is Bourbon Street, right where you see that Walgreens sign. And that's where you may have seen video. There's some video circulating from a business owner around here where you see the white truck driving right here, right in front of this Crown Plaza. And then there was last night apparently a cop car that was stopped right there, blocking people from going in. And that truck went right around it, but then basically cut right in front of that cop car, going on the curb and going down that way. And that's when the mayhem started. So that part we can't see too far down. We were able to see one of those bollards, and there's also some like street blockers is basically what I call them. And if you live in Washington, D.C., or if you've been around any secured building, you may have seen them. They're flat, but they do come up like this so a car can't drive over it. That's farther down. We saw some that were there. They're being repaired because the Super Bowl is coming here next month. So, of course, there's going to be added security. But people are here for the Sugar Bowl. This tragedy happened in the business district, the French Quarter. Over my shoulder, you may be able to see crowds of people still walking around right now. They're here not only because it's the French Quarter and it's New Orleans, but because tonight the Sugar Bowl was supposed to happen. So you had fans from Notre Dame, fans here. You had fans from Georgia. They're supposed to be tonight at the game. That is now not happening. So it's an odd setting, Major. You have people who want to be a festive, in a festive mood because we are here in New Orleans and it's January 1st. But just right here, it's taped off, and that's where this tragedy happened right behind us. We're still trying to get information, Major. It's very fluid here.
Omar, is it worth noting that Bourbon Street in the world-famous French Quarter, for the moment and for the next couple of hours at least, if not longer, remains an active crime scene?
Well, we were trying to get in to see how close we could get just a few hours ago, and state troopers were telling us, we tried to fly a drone, they said no, there were still some of the victims there on the ground. So this is still a very active crime scene for parts of the French Quarter, but there are people who are still walking around here with an occasional drink, still having fun here, but of course they are shocked at what just happened across the street. This side of Canal Street almost seems like it's business as usual, but people are shocked. The other side, it is an active crime scene here on January 1st.
Tandem realities, business as usual on one side of Canal, shock, disbelief, very pronounced layers of horror on the other side of Canal Street and then down Bourbon Street into the heart of the French Quarter. Nicole Skanga, your thoughts?
I want to point out here, Major, this is the deadliest U.S. vehicle ramming that we know of, and there is a rich history of this particular kind of attack, often a terrorist attack. The use of a vehicle as a weapon, not new. Attacks of this nature require minimal capability but can have a devastating impact in crowded areas. San Jose State University has tracked 184 vehicle ramming attacks between 1963 and 2019. Of course, we mentioned earlier last year the Magdeburg, Germany attack where 5 were killed. There was also a notable attack in 2021 in Waukesha, Wisconsin that many in our audience might remember. 6 were killed in that vehicle ramming attack against a Christmas parade. In 2017 in New York City along the Hudson River in Manhattan, there was a vehicle that rammed its way into a bike lane. 8 died there, 11 were injured. In Charlottesville, Virginia, in that same year, Heather Heyer died during the Unite the Right rally. After that, a perpetrator swerved his car into protests. And who could forget the 2016 Nice attack where more than 80 people died in this vehicle ramming attack? And this is going to be a huge concern for the United States moving forward. You heard during that press conference with local law enforcement and with FBI, the mayor as well as local chief of police Kirkpatrick there trying to explain how the retractable barricades were malfunctioning. And, former Mayor Landrieu installed those barricades using Department of Homeland Security funding at the time, to the tune of $40 million. Those malfunctions, they had mentioned that during Mardi Gras celebrations, there were beads that were thrown into them. They did not work properly. I'm texting with law enforcement officials here at the desk who are telling me there's concern. Will we need to put up barricades in every major U.S. city? And how do we ensure that they work effectively moving forward? We heard from the governor there saying whatever the problem was, it's going to be solved. So some reassurances, but the solution today was to put a police cruiser there in the French Quarter. That's a resource that not every law enforcement agency, the more than 18,000 across the country, can afford. We know that right now law enforcement resources are very tight.
And there's a balancing act, right? You got to balance safety with business. According to the memos reviewed by CBS News from New Orleans in 2017, where they talked about possibly limiting traffic altogether in that area, bollards aside. One of the city memos said businesses weren't keen on that because they want to have traffic coming through. They want the business. That's always a balancing act. It's easy to revisionist history, the decisions made, but cities across the country have to consider that too.
Right. If you're going to put bollards up and then you're going to put squad cars up and then you're going to put big trucks on top or on reinforced as a layer or in front of the police cars, then what kind of atmosphere are you creating for those who want to have a safe pedestrian experience?
Doesn't say
they feel like they're in an armed camp.
Yeah.
And businesses understandably worry and fret about that.
And I mention this because there is at this point, as this day evolves, some symmetry between an incident in Las Vegas and in New Orleans. There was an explosion of a car near the Trump Hotel in the Las Vegas Strip area.
We see that on video right now.
According to our latest CBS News reporting, somebody in that car is dead. They don't know if it's a man or a woman. You see the scope and size of that explosion. There are injuries, too, and there's an investigation underway as to whether there are other explosives in the area. You have 2 different events on the same day, both in that business district where there are people, where there are crowds. And if there's a connective tissue between the 2, we expect it to come out. But again, you have to make these decisions as city leaders. How far do you want to go now? Do you want to put bollards around the entire business district? Do you want to do what Washington, D.C. will do January 20th, put huge salt trucks on all the on-ramps and off-ramps to say, we don't want anybody coming around here? In that case, for the inauguration, it makes a lot of sense. But businesses and cities will grapple with how much do we want to tell people stay away.
Yeah, and best laid plans, Major. You can plan and plan and plan, but as we heard from Chief of Police Kirkpatrick today, she said we did indeed have a plan. The terrorists defeated it.
Nicole Skanga, Scott McFarland, all the others who contributed to this coverage, I thank you very much. Just to recap before we depart for the hour. From New Orleans, the FBI says it does not believe the driver in this morning's deadly truck attack acted alone and is asking the public to help track down any, quote, known associates, unquote. The attacker, who was killed in a shootout with police has been identified as 42-year-old Shamsuddin Jabbar from Texas. He served in the U.S. military, a native-born American citizen. Investigators recovered an ISIS flag, an AR-style rifle, handgun, and several explosive devices in or near his vehicle. Officials are investigating this New Year's morning attack as an act of terrorism. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news, and of course tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Good day.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us here on CBS News 24/7. I'm Lindsay Reiser. We're following breaking news out of New Orleans, where at least 10 people have been killed and 35 hurt when a man drove a truck into a crowd on Bourbon Street. The FBI is investigating the attack as possible terrorism. The attacker is dead. He's been identified by federal officials as 42-year-old Shamsuddin Jabbar, a U.S.-born citizen and Army veteran who lived in Houston, Texas. The electric